Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at the feature race on Saturday at Monmouth Park. It is race 9, the Blue Sparkler Stakes, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf for 3-year-old fillies. And Craig, as we throw up the field for this race, there are 9 in the main body of the field, 1 also eligible, though I think that AE has a pretty good chance of participating because there are 3 runners in this race that are cross-entered in the Coronation Cup on Friday at Saratoga. And I would imagine a lot of the connections re-entered in this spot because there's rain predicted in the Saratoga area on Friday. There's some rain predicted in New Jersey. So we'll see if either one or both of these races stay on the turf, and this field may or may not hold together.
Yeah, and even the AE is cross-entered at Colonial Downs for a 4th horse. So it's one of those that's kind of tough to handicap. Not sure exactly who's going to show up, but I think we're going to cover the entire field.
Yeah, and a couple of those runners that are cross-entered, like Love Appeals, the number 1, and the number 3, Bossarati, don't even have riders named yet in this race. So something to consider in your handicapping, that there could be some scratches in this race. Let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector before we get to the main contenders. And like we were saying, this pace projector, it could change and it will update for scratches if any of these runners do come out of the race. But as the field is drawn, it does appear like there's plenty of speed signed on, Craig. Definitely some runners that want to be forward, including the number 3, Bossarati, and the number 6, Lady Irvine, 2 runners that possess a ton of early speed.
There's definitely some speed in the field. At 5.5 furlongs, you still want to be careful with thinking that's going to automatically set up for a closer. But as you note, it's pretty likely this pace projector is going to change. And luckily in Timeform US and the DRF website, it will update as scratches come in.
Let's go through this field, mostly in post-position order, beginning with the number 1, Love Appeals. Let's take a look at her last race at Aqueduct back at the end of April, and this was a pretty impressive allowance victory. She got a good trip this day, stalking the pace, saving ground around the far turn, but once she tips out at the top of the stretch under Manny Franco, she puts this field away with ease. She finishes 4 3/4 lengths ahead of Sweet Lou's Got Aces, who came back to win her next start with a respectable speed figure. So the form of this race definitely holds up to scrutiny. She is one of those that is entered in the Coronation Cup on Friday. And I would also note, while she's coming off a bit of a layoff, it's not a planned layoff because she was actually entered in the Soaring Softly and was the favorite in that race, the morning line favorite at least, at the end of May. I know Christophe Clement was not quite happy with how she was doing coming into that race, so scratched her. She's had some time off, and now she's going to compete this weekend, but we'll see where.
Yeah, that was a powerhouse performance wherever she shows up. I mean, you don't often see turf sprints won by almost 5 lengths. She ran a big speed figure. As you noted, Sweet Lou's Got Aces came back to win with an improved speed figure. Another one of the also rans came back to win with a good speed figure on dirt. So not only did she win easily, it's proven to be a very strong race.
And I'll just note, she's shown pretty far back on the pace projector. I think that's largely a function of the fact that she was competing in 2 turn races for her first 2 starts of her career. She ran a much faster pace figure in her sprint last time, so she's one that I would expect to be a little more forwardly placed than she's shown on that pace projector. The number 2 is Beauty of the Sea, and we're going to check out her victory 2 back. This was her last turf race when she broke her maiden at Gulfstream Park. Did so in gate-to-wire fashion this day. I like the way that she digs in through the stretch to hold off this rival that's chasing her home, but I was even more impressed by her last race, Craig, which did come on the Tapeta surface, because she showed a different dimension, raiding behind horses and gamely splitting rivals in the stretch when it didn't look like there was a whole lot of room there.
And as we looked at the pace projector, that could come in handy, a horse who's able to maybe come from a little bit off the pace. You can see that speed figure was a little bit questionable, so maybe look at that downgrade, that 6-point decline with a grain of salt, because there was something going on that day that made the speed figure tough. So she's good. It just kind of depends who else shows up in here, how strong of a contender I think she would be.
The number 3 is Bossarati, and she is one of 3 horses in this field that is exiting the Stormy Blues at Laurel from the middle of June. We'll take a look at the stretch run of that race. Bossarati is the one that's leading this field into the stretch, and that's the way she runs. She likes to go fast early and then try to hang on. She's being chased home by Cora Pearl as well as My Sweet Affair, who will come into the picture on the outside, making a late run. But Bossarati is able to hold them all off this day, Craig, and she's a horse whose career has completely turned around ground since switching to the turf. She had descended into some lower level claiming races this winter, but the switch to turf really woke her up, and now she's won 3 in a row.
And won them impressively. And it's not like they handed her the last race. She earned it. You can see that 125 speed figure early. So she was on a clear lead, but she did it because she broke well and went so fast out of the gate. She was game to the wire. So it just kind of depends how the rest of the field shakes out. But she's a danger, because if I had to pick one that I think is going to be in front, it would be her.
She is entered at Saratoga on Friday, as is the number 8, My Sweet Affair, who was second in that Stormy Blues. And I thought she took a pretty good late run at Bossarati in the late stages, just sort of ran out of real estate at the end of that race, Craig. She did not get the easiest trip to back in that Mamzelle at Churchill Downs. When she drew a wide post position, was legitimately 3 to 4 wide around the far turn. That's a tough trip to pull in a turf sprint, but she had run well in her surrounding races and makes a lot of sense here, given the fact that she can come from off the pace.
Yeah, and even that race at Laurel, I'd recommend people watch the start. There's some comments in there. She definitely had some trouble. I'm not sure it's quite as dramatic as maybe the comments make it seem, but enough to make up a half length probably. So you can see she ran that 109 speed figure, which would be very formidable in here, 3 back. And if you believe she has her excuses in her last 2, like I think both of us do, she's certainly one that could contend.
And I think I misspoke just earlier. It was Caroline Christina, the other horse in that race, not Cora Pearl. We'll get to her in just a little bit. Cora Pearl, Craig, who's up next, she is a horse who last competed at Delaware. That was her turf debut. It was a soft turf course. She was facing some older rivals, but just didn't really come with much of a kick in the stretch that day. She was a little one-paced. She's going to have to do a little better.
She is. I guess the upside would see the big jump in the speed figure, but she wasn't really a factor in that race. It was a soft turf course. It just looks like she kind of treaded water all the way around the track. So she seems like an outsider to me, but there is that one thing where the speed figure improvement, maybe that was a sign of things to come, but it would have to be another one here.
The number 5 is Talk to the Judge. She is one of a couple of horses in this race that will be trying the turf for the first time if this race stays on the turf. Craig, I do wonder if a couple of these runners that are entered for turf are sort of like incognito MTO horses, because there's not a whole lot of turf pedigree with this filly. Golden Lad, her sire, is an 11% turf sprint sire, but she's one that would have to improve a little bit on this surface if she were to be successful on turf.
For sure. I'm with you. I think maybe they were entered sort of as MTOs, but also with the why not take a shot on turf? She has speed. It's a turf sprint. She wouldn't be for me for betting purposes, but I can see why they're taking a shot, figuring maybe this field will shrink even from what it is.
The number 6 is Lady Irvine, and she is another one of those runners that possesses a ton of early speed, and we saw that on display in this replay that we're taking a look at from July at Monmouth. She blasted off to the front end down the backstretch against this allowance field, opened up coming off the quarter pole, and is able to hold on in the late stages. She is another one like Bossarati, Craig, that will be gunning out of the gate, but if both of these horses do participate in this spot, it just feels like something has to give.
It does, and she's coming back on very short rest, less than 2 weeks. She's been awesome since she turned to the turf, had a brief layoff after Gulfstream, but hard to knock anything she's done. She's been top. She's just going to have to improve her speed figure to compete if, some of the others show up that we're not sure about.
The number 7 is Dream Concert. She is another one of these runners that will be making her turf debut in this race for trader Kathleen O'Connell. And, Craig, this filly really hasn't done much wrong in her career. Her one poor effort, if you can even call it that, came when she finished behind Money's Gold in that race where Money's Gold set the track record at Tampa. So can't fault her for that. And since then, she was a narrow loser once at Tampa and then came back and won this race at Monmouth. She is one that might be in here if the race comes off the turf, though I will say, despite the lack of turf pedigree, when I watch her replays, she's got one of those strides with great extension and that loping quality to it that says to me, turf might be within her capabilities, but she's another one that is going to have to answer that question.
Yeah, I was thinking the same. I didn't get negative vibes for her moving the turf just watching her race. And she ran a very nice speed figure on dirt last time, that 107. And she did it while wide and not just wide, 3 wide on the turn, pressing a very fast pace. You can see the fractions in red. So she was game to hold on to the wire. If she takes the turf, I think she's really dangerous.
And then rounding out the main body of the field as drawn is the number 9 Plentitude. Let's take a look at her last race at Belmont. This was against some older rivals and some 3-year-olds going 6 furlongs on the inner turf course there. And this was also her turf debut. She had won her debut race in her career at Tampa on the dirt. But getting on the grass here, Craig, I really thought that she showed some likable attributes, raiding in behind horses early. You can see in the stretch here, when she finds some room, she splits rivals pretty gamely under a hands and heels ride from Joel Rosario to get up. I think this filly has some quality, and she's supposed to get some pace to close into.
I really liked what I saw from her. It's not often you see a young horse able to do what she did, move in between horses like that, raid in behind horses. Really like the finish that she had. The speed figure came out well. 107 is as good as everybody, but the inside horse, Love Appeals, her stablemate, I guess. So she's definitely one that I think has a big chance. I think with a scratch or two, that 9 post isn't going to look as bad either.
And then drawn on the far outside, the number 10, Caroline Christina, who at this moment is listed as an also eligible entrant. As Craig noted, she is also cross-entered elsewhere. She didn't run that badly last time in the Stormy Blues, but I just didn't see a big excuse for her, Craig, to lose to Bossarati and My Sweet Affair. Who knows? Maybe neither one of those runners will show up in this race, so that might make her task a little easier, but she still would have to overcome an outside post.
Yeah, she's slightly raced. I mean, she improved second time out. She could certainly improve again. So if she draws in, I think she's worth taking a look at.
Well, let's throw up our picks for this Blue Sparkler. And Craig, admittedly, it's kind of tough to make picks in a race where you don't know if the field is going to hold together. But I think we both agree, regardless of how it shakes out, Christophe Clement holds a pretty strong hand in this race. I do think the number 1, Love Appeals, is the horse to beat. I'd imagine she'd be the favorite if she runs in this spot. But I agree with you that his other horse, the number 9, Plentitude, is pretty dangerous.
Yeah, in full disclosure, I put her on top because I suspect Love Appeals is not going to show up here with Plentitude having a rider named and Love Appeals not. There's also a little concern that she was scratched last time for reasons the trainer just didn't think she was doing as well, gave her some more time. But in any case, I think Plentitude ran fine last time and is just as likely to win as Love Appeals, even if that one shows up, and will probably be a bigger price. We don't have the morning line at this time, but I would imagine Love Appeals would be the morning line favorite. So I went value seeking as well.
The number 9, Plentitude, on top for Craig, and I've got the number 1, Love Appeals, in the Blue Sparkler Stakes at Monmouth Park on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.